Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And if you're joining me on YouTube or on Facebook, thank you for being part of this. We are on to just, I think, a very beautiful, beautiful section of Lech Lecha. That's the Parsha, the first Parsha that deals with Abraham's life. And we are in this last part of the Parsha that talks about the Brit Milah, the covenant of the circumcision. And yesterday, in our last lesson, we started about it, and we're going to continue right now. And essentially, uh, he is talking about what this covenant is about, right? And how it involves the land. That's part of it. I'm trying to think. Oh, he talks about how kings will issue from him. I'm trying to think what else. Just trying to summarize what it is. Also, where it says here, "Ki av hamon goyim netaticha," right? This is where Abram's name is changed to Avraham. And Abram is like a acronym for father of Aram, but Avraham means father of a multitude. And so there's a very important note of universality that is this, because it talks about, that people will in fact be related, because we read about how Abram had all these other children after Sarah died. And besides Isaac and Ishmael, he also had, I believe, 10 other children. So they're all, in other words, I feel that the Torah is trying to tell us that humanity, right, that these people spread throughout the world, and so that we are all actually blood related and all share to some extent in this covenant, this possibility, and the yearning that we have for the world to recognize that we are all related through our divine parent. So, and in acknowledging that. Anyway, continuing. Vayomer Elohim Avraham. Now his name is Avraham, right? He says, and God said to Abraham, Va'ata, as for you, oops, don't know what happened there. I may have lost, yep, just lost the share. 1 second here. I'll have to get it, see if I can get it out again. Forgive me. That was a great place to lose it, I must tell you. Amazing. I do not know. Okay, totally lost. Okay, 1 second. I'm going to pause the Zoom. Going to have to do that. All right. So it says, as for you, Briti Tishmor, you shall guard my covenant. Ata, you, Vezaracha acharecha, and your seed after you, Ledortam, for all generations. Right. So, Beni uvenech. Let me see. No, not there yet. Because that's Yud here. All right, let's keep going. Zot Briti, this is my covenant, Asher Tishmeru, that you will guard Beini Uveinechem, and yourselves, between me and yourselves, Uvein Zaracha Acharecha, and with your seed following you. And here it is. This is it. Himol Lachin Kol Zachar. You shall circumcise, you shall circumcise every male among you. Okay. And yesterday, okay, let's do the Rashi, Beini uvenechem. In other words, between me and you, etc. Otam shel achshav. That is to say, those right now, meaning that what this circumcision that God was telling Abraham, that he and his male offspring right there in his family were to circumcise themselves. They were to get circumcised. Uvein zaracha acharecha, and your seed afterwards, ha'atidin lehivaled acharecha, that in the future will be born after you, which is why the Jewish people observe the covenant of circumcision to this very day. And I believe Muslims also observe circumcision, because remember, Ishmael was part of Abraham's household at this point. Isaac has not been born yet. And I think the significance is that Isaac is born after Abraham is circumcised, that he is a product, Isaac is a product of circumcised Abraham. And again, just to emphasize this, the whole point of circumcising the male member is a very fundamental point about control, about not allowing oneself to let your urges and lusts control you as a human being. It is reflected in the laws of kashrut, in the laws regarding the marriages and relationships that are permitted, etc., that part of becoming a human being as opposed to just an animal is our ability to control ourselves and our lusts and our appetites. It is fundamental, and this circumcision is symbolic of that. And I don't know if we realize just how serious a matter that really is in terms of allowing us to enjoy life and to make the most of who we are here as human beings. So going on, himol, right? Kamo lehimol. So it's saying that the hay has been elided, right? Kamo lehimol, kamo sha'ata omer. So Rashi's giving us a grammatical example here. So one says asot, kamo la'asot. So asot is, I think, the gerund, right? Doing, something like that, as it means to do, right? So himol means le hamol, to circumcise. And he's talking about himol here, himolachem. So it is, what is this covenant? To circumcise for yourselves every male. That's what Rashi is saying, as opposed to necessarily a command, right? An imperative. Here he's saying this word here just simply means this is the covenant. In other words, to circumcise for yourselves every male. Going on. Unemaltem et besar orlatchem. Right. So what exactly is this milah? You shall cut the flesh of your foreskins. V'haya la'otrit, and it shall be as a sign of this covenant. Beini uveinechem, and you. So, it's quite significant. There is a physical sign of this amazing covenant. And in our previous lesson, I explained that part of this has to do with immortality. That even though the Torah is not going to explicitly say this, I am fully convinced that it's in a way the gift that God is giving to the Jewish people, right, in circumcising themselves. And yesterday I explained in our previous lesson how in some ways it goes back to the tree of knowledge and the mortality that happened after the eating of the tree of knowledge. And that, of course, we know that the serpent is a phallic symbol and that it has all to do with that. Anyway, go on. Unemaltem, kamo umaltem. He says, it's just as it's saying, and you shall circumcise. Nimaltem sounds like a nifal, that is to say, a passive, shall be circumcised. But he says that is not the case here. Again, Rashi at times, as we've already experienced, sometimes goes into grammatical discussion and analysis. So in terms of the Hebrew itself. And he goes on, he says, V'hanun, and the nun of nimaltem bo yetera. He says it's yetera means sort of in a way redundant. Okay, but redundant's the wrong word here. It just means it's an addition. I think it has to yetera liyasod. It's not, he's saying it is not part of the root of the word, right? Hanofel bo lifrakim. So we have verbs that start off with the letter nun, right? And occasionally they will, in certain grammatical forms, the nun gets elided, it disappears in that particular construction, right? So he says here it's not nifal, and he's saying here it's not part of the root. And there he says, right? Kagoni gives you an example. This is helpful, right? The nun shel noshech, right? So the root of this word noshech means to bite, right? I believe. I think so, yeah. And the root is nun shin chet, okay? Venun shel noseh, right? So vayisa, right? It doesn't say vayinsa, it says vayisa or vayishach, right? The nun disappears there, right? Right. Unemaltem, and the word nemaltem, kamo unisa, looks like nisatem, right? And I think here he's saying that you're saying that the nemaltem is like the word unisatem, but that's not the case here, he's saying. Right, he's saying it's not like nisatem. Aval yimo, right? Yasho, the word, wait a second, let me make sure. I want to make sure I'm making this, that I'm explaining this correctly. Forgive me. Um, so he says it's Lashon Yifal. He says Yimol is an expression of future, that it shall be done, right? And let me make sure I've got it. Kamo Ya'aseh, right, as will be, Yochal, he will eat. And he's saying, here is a editorial comment that's saying in earlier editions of Rashi, this last comment is not mentioned. I think this grammatical comment is not mentioned. So I want to make sure that I am explaining this correctly. Uh, yeah, because it does sound like I'm trying to think of what the root would be. And it could well be. It doesn't, as I'm looking at this with you, okay, carefully, I, I have to make sure, and I may share this with you at our next lesson, whether the root is namal, right? Judith, please go
Um,
ahead.
you said you said that in one edition of Rashi, it's not there. Where would it have been brought in from?
Okay. So there were later editions. Remember, I'm sure they have early manuscript editions of Rashi, and they have various editions. Like there may be editions of Rashi in the Vatican Library. There are certain libraries which have very ancient manuscripts or very early printed editions, and scholars certainly go over these things and compare editions of these particular texts. See, hmm, when he says what confused me here, quite, to as you're having to tolerate my ignorance here, when he says "V'hanun bo yitera la yasod," it absolutely that sounds like it's added to the root. Yasod would be the root, okay? Yesod hanofel bo lifrakim. So now I'm having to go back and rethink this explanation that I've just given you, right? And say he actually is saying that it is a pain nun verb, and that the root of this verb is, in fact, nun mem lamed. Okay. That is, in fact, the root. We know that in Hebrew, most roots of verbs are trilateral. They have three letters. So the question is, what are the three letters that form the root of to circumcise? And I believe what Rashi is saying, and I just explained it in the reverse. I have to turn 180 degrees, and I hope this process, which shows my errors, etc., is still interesting and a teachable moment. Then, in fact, what he is saying is that the nun is part of the root. What threw me was when he said yite ra, right? But I believe he is saying that it is, in fact, part of the root. And he just simply says it's like the root where that nun drops out in certain, and he gave you that example, right? Noshech, noseh, unemaltem, right? Unesatem, right? And then he says, yimol, right? There will be circumcised. You notice that the nun has dropped out there, right? It really technically would be yin mol, but you can hear how the nun is in a very weak position in terms of pronouncing the word. And so in Hebrew, it gets elided and into it. Okay. And he says it means will do. So I do believe that I've been able to work through the correct understanding of this. So I have to apologize for doing this on the fly with you. Okay. All right. Going on. So Uvin more, this is a mitzvah. There are not a lot of mitzvahs in Genesis, but this is a mitzvah, right? Uvin shmonat yamim, and on 8 days, imol lachem kol zachar ledorotechem. Your males will be circumcised for all generations. You lead by it, that is to say, one who is born in the house, meaning your children who are born in the house, umiknat kesef, and those that are purchased, meaning servants or slaves, that if they come into your household, they are to be sent. Look at this. Michol ben Nechar. Of all, ben Nechar would be a stranger, a non-Jew. Asher lo, keep going, who is not mizaracha, who is not of your seed. So what is interesting is this, that here are non-Jews who become part in entering a Jewish household, are circumcised, and therefore share in this covenant. So when I was studying as a student in rabbinical school, there was a process by which a person who was a slave, a non-Jewish slave, could become free and Jewish, right? Well, they were already half Jewish because when they entered the household, they were circumcised. And I realize that this might be a painful operation. Yes, I think we just have to take it for what it's worth here. So here he says, but here he says, you lead by it, one who is born in your home. And here he says, Rashi, very helpful, sheyeledato hashivcha babayit, that the maidservant has given birth to in your home. She has given birth to this male child. You are to circumcise that male child. But as I said, the main point we need to focus on is the fact that here are non-Jewish people who are able to enter and share in the covenant that God is making with the Jewish people. Miknat kesef. So again, it seems shekan'o mishinolad, whom he acquired once it was born. So it does seem as if Rashi is referring to babies here as well. As to adults, this is not, we'll see what it says, okay? We'll see what it is. Let's keep going, okay? Yimol shall certainly be circumcised. Yilid beitcha, right. Let's say sure. One born in your household, kaspecha, and one purchased by your money, has been purchased. Va'ita briti. This emphasizes not just a matter of a physical operation. It says, Va'ita briti, and my covenant shall be bivsarchem, in your flesh, levrit olam, as a perpetual covenant. So, covenant in your flesh. I understand it to be talking about saying that despite the fact that as physical human beings, we are mortal, that we're saying that what we're saying here is a reference to immortality. Going on. Himol yimol yilid beitecha. Okay. Beitcha. This is beitcha. Kan kafal alav. Rashi says, here he repeats what he said, what he just said. Velo amar lishmona yamim, but did not say at 8 days, as it is for a Jewish baby, right? Lelamedcha, to teach you, sheyesh yilid bayit nimol, to teach you that there is one born in a house, nimol lachar, that is circumcised after, and he says there's Sfarim Acherim, means there are other editions of Rashi, other manuscripts or printed editions, that instead of la'achar, meaning after, they have le'echad, shmona yamim. Now, what it would mean as le'echad shmona yamim, I'm not really sure. I mean, la'achad we know means to one, right? Does it mean to one person? Does it mean I'm not sure. I'd have to really think about that. So lachar shmona yamim, to tell you that there are not. Let me go back just to make sure I get the sense for you. Right, yesh bayit nimol, that there are one born in the house that is in fact circumcised after 8 days. Kamoshe mefurash b'Masechet Shabbat. So in Masechet Shabbat, in the tractate Shabbat, in the Gemara, there is a major chapter that deals with the idea of circumcision on Shabbat, right? So the law is, because we would seem to have a contradiction of laws here. On the one hand, you have to circumcise a child at 8 days, a male child at 8 days. What if that 8th day falls on Shabbat? And on Shabbat, you're not supposed to do any act that involves like slaughtering. That's something forbidden. But basically, changing the state of something on Shabbat. So the question is, what happens on Shabbat? Well, when you have a positive commandment, like you shall circumcise at 8 days, and a negative commandment, which says, you shall not do any act of slaughtering. And in this case, of course, it's a destroying act that's for positive reasons. The positive commandment overrides the negative one. It's a general rule. But there are also circumstances where a child may, for example, if it's a hemophiliac, and in that case you have to wait. And what I believe Rashi is telling us and is discussed in Masechet Shabbat is, are there circumstances where a child, the 8th day would fall on Shabbat, and the child needs to be circumcised after 8 days, cannot be circumcised on Shabbat. And what Rashi is saying to us is that here the Torah, in a way, is telling us that that is in fact permissible and is a proper observance of the commandment. Because I realize that in some ways we're not used to thinking about things in this way, but commandments are serious matters. If in fact we take seriously the idea of a divine commandment, then doing it as properly as possible, it becomes extremely important. And understanding that gives us a better understanding of the process of Jewish law and halacha as it's discussed. So again, I say that the main text of the written law is doing what doesn't come naturally, and the main text of, or rather the sub alternative title of, or the subtitle of the oral law is circumstances alter cases. And that is in fact what we'd be discussing here. And we'll end here for today. If there are any questions, please feel free. I know that this has not been the easiest, let me make sure I've got this here. There we go. Just wanted to give it a little bit thicker. And of course, with God's help, we will continue this tomorrow, discussing this mitzvah, and I will stop the share. Okay. Any thoughts or questions? All right. Okay.